For over 4,500 years, the Great Pyramid of Giza has stood motionless under the scorching Egyptian sun, like an ancient guardian that has survived countless eras and events. It is the only remaining wonder of the ancient world that still inspires awe and mystery. Throughout all these centuries, scientists and researchers believed they knew everything about it. They meticulously measured every centimeter, studied each stone slab, and created detailed maps of all the known corridors and chambers inside the pyramid. They confidently identified it as the tomb of Pharaoh Khufu, or Cheops, and included this information in history textbooks, convinced that they had unraveled all the secrets of this unique structure. However, what if the most important and mysterious aspect of this pyramid is not its appearance or architecture at all, but the fact that we actually know very little about it? What if all our knowledge is merely superficial, and the true secrets are hidden so deep that we are unaware of their existence? Before we proceed to the main part of our story, I would like to ask for a small favor. Your reaction is the best way to show appreciation for the work done. Your likes and subscriptions are a thank you and an encouragement for us to continue our research. Thank you for that. For many decades, scientists, engineers, and explorers have tried to penetrate the most secretive corners of the pyramid to uncover its mysteries. Inside its massive walls are so-called ventilation shafts, narrow, almost invisible channels only 20 by 20 centimeters wide. These shafts lead upward from rooms where, according to ancient legends, the bodies of the pharaohs, those of the king and queen, are laid to rest. For a long time, there was a theory that these narrow passages served as ventilation, ensuring air circulation inside the pyramid. But this version collapsed when it was discovered that the shafts starting from the lower chambers do not lead outside at all. Instead, they end in sealed stone slabs, behind which something mysterious is hidden. Behind these walls are enigmatic doors, behind which apparently lies the unknown, something that has yet to be uncovered. And so, quite recently, after years of preparation and development, a modern micro-robot was put into action. A tiny device equipped with a drill and an endoscopic camera. Its task was to navigate one of these mysterious shafts and do what no one had succeeded in before. Drill a hole in the unusual door and look behind it into the very unknown that has been sealed inside the pyramid for millennia. The world held its breath, and finally, after a long, tense journey, the robot broke through the stone and activated its camera. For a brief moment, it transmitted an image revealing what was hidden behind the door. But in the next instant, the connection was cut off and the transmission disappeared. An official statement from the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities was brief and disappointing. It merely mentioned a technical malfunction. Dust stirred up by drilling clogged the device's optics, and a voltage surge caused by this damaged the transmitter. As a result, according to their words, the room behind the door turned out to be quite small and empty. No secrets, no treasures, just another dead end. Thus ended a story that could have marked the beginning of a new phase in the study of ancient civilizations. Everything remained at the level of assumptions and guesses, as if the story we could uncover had remained untold. However, in an age saturated with information, nothing disappears forever. Within a few days, a single frame began circulating on closed internet forums where archaeologists, engineers, and enthusiasts of ancient mysteries communicate. This shot was blurry and distorted by interference, but after digital processing, it still revealed something unusual. This image, presumably obtained from that very robot moments before losing contact, caused a stir. Before we revisit the mysterious frame hidden deep within an ancient pyramid, let's take a closer look at several real cases where discovered artifacts and knowledge were deliberately concealed, ignored, or distorted. All of this was done because they did not fit into the convenient and familiar picture of the world that had formed in people's consciousness. Such cases are not only found in the history of archaeology, but also in other fields of knowledge, where the truth seems too unacceptable or inconvenient for existing beliefs. For example, in November 1922, one of the most famous archaeological discoveries in history took place. British archaeologist Howard Carter, who dedicated many years to searching the Valley of the Kings, finally did what shocked the entire world. After long and unsuccessful efforts, he managed to find the nearly intact tomb of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun. This discovery turned out to be a real treasure. There were golden sarcophagi, luxurious chariots, statues, jewelry, everything that could adorn a royal tomb. The collection was so rich and impressive that nearly 10 years were spent on its complete description and cataloging. The world was overjoyed and filled with admiration. Newspapers were filled with bright headlines. Photographs of the countless riches were published in millions of copies. Everything seemed idyllic. A dedicated scientist, a generous expedition sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, and the mysterious, shining treasures of the ancients. However, behind this glittering facade lay a different, much darker story, full of concealments, ambiguities, and mysteries. From the very beginning, the excavations were accompanied by strange events and suspicious circumstances. Lord Carnarvon, who financed the expedition, suddenly died from an infection after a mosquito bite. This event gave rise to the legend of the Pharaoh's curse, which supposedly hovered over everyone daring to delve into ancient secrets. But there was another, no less sinister curse, the curse of silence. Howard Carter, according to many of his colleagues, was a secretive man, obsessed with his work and very suspicious. Rumors arose that he, along with Lord Carnarvon, had entered the burial chamber several days before the official opening, and possibly stole some of the finds. Official accounts dismissed these accusations. However, decades later, items began appearing in private collections that, according to experts, could only have come from the tomb of Tutankhamun. This indicated that some of the valuables might have been secretly removed or hidden, but the most significant and mysterious concealment involved not just gold or precious stones. In the burial chamber, behind the wall decorated with scenes from the afterlife, there were always suspicions and guesses. For example, the northern wall looked different from the others. The plaster on it was of a different color, and the images seemed to have been painted hastily or later than the other murals. For many years, it was believed that this was simply a construction feature, nothing special. However, in 2015, the renowned British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves, carefully examining high-resolution photographs of the walls, noticed straight lines beneath the layer of plaster, resembling the outlines of hidden doorways. His theory caused a sensation. Reeves suggested that Tutankhamun's tomb was only the front part of a larger, more significant burial site concealed behind this facade. He argued that behind the wall, where the images were painted, there could be an entrance leading to a much grander tomb, the tomb of Egypt's most legendary queen, Nefertiti, whose burial site has yet to be discovered. According to his hypothesis, the young pharaoh who died suddenly left the world as if it had paused in anticipation of an unveiling that could rival the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb by Carter. At this moment, the Egyptian bureaucratic machinery stepped in, immediately beginning to hinder this important event. The Ministry of Antiquities, responsible for preserving the heritage, decided to put obstacles in the way of uncovering the secret. Initially, they claimed that the data obtained from modern radar and scanner scans were insufficiently convincing and required further verification. Then, after conducting their own third scan, they announced that no significant results had been found, although detailed reports of its findings were never published. All further research was prohibited under the pretext of preserving the integrity of the monument and avoiding possible damage. Thus, the door that could have given us access to answers was slammed shut forever. Why did this happen? The official version attributes it to the protection of ancient heritage, claiming it must be preserved from destruction and unnecessary interference. But there are also unofficial versions, more hidden and frightening. They assume that the authorities fear that secrets are hidden inside this monument, which could overturn all our notions of ancient Egypt. After all, the discovery of Nefertiti's tomb would be a world-changing event, sparking a wave of interest and research. But at the same time, such a find would bring about numerous complex problems. It would require decades of painstaking work, enormous costs and resources, and most importantly, it could completely shift the global focus onto a single tomb, devaluing other archaeological projects and discoveries. Or perhaps the reasons for concealment go even deeper. Maybe the authorities are afraid that a new find could rewrite history, alter our understanding of the entire 18th dynasty, which holds an important place in Egypt's history. We do not know exactly what is hidden behind this secret. There are only scientific indications pointing to the presence of something unusual, mysterious, that could radically change our understanding of the past. but there is also a strict prohibition against revealing it. The mystery of Tutankhamun was not in a curse, as is commonly believed, but in the fact that his tomb is just the tip of a huge iceberg, beneath which lie even more incredible discoveries, still inaccessible to our eyes. In the 20th century, in the year 2000, off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, a group of sponge divers stumbled upon a sunken ship from the time of the Roman Empire. Among scattered marble statues, amphorae, and other cargo, they raised to the surface a strange metallic object, a piece of bronze fused with stones and shells. No one paid much attention to it, and it was sent to the storage of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where it remained for decades. This was the first concealment, and it happened unknowingly. Only half a century later, in 1950, a scientist named Derek Price began studying this strange artifact, and what he discovered seemed impossible. Inside the corrosion covering the bronze piece, a complex system of dozens of miniature gears, dials, and scales was hidden. It was not just some primitive mechanism, but a true high-precision analog computer. When scientists managed to restore it using X-rays and computed tomography, they were stunned. This mechanism dated back to approximately the 2nd century BCE and could model the movements of the sun, moon, and the 5 then-known planets with incredible accuracy. It predicted solar and lunar eclipses, calculated dates for the Olympic Games, and displayed lunar phases. Its intricate differential gear transmission was comparable to the mechanisms of Swiss watches from the 15th century. Such an artifact simply could not exist. It was at least 1,500 years ahead of its time. And then began the second concealment of this discovery. It would be easier to call it a chance, brilliant insight, a rare anomalous phenomenon that did not develop further and was later possibly forged or mythologized. Textbooks tried to avoid mentioning it because it completely shattered the existing chronology of history and raised uncomfortable questions. If the ancient Greeks could create such complex mechanisms, what then could their ancestors have done? What knowledge and technologies have we lost over the centuries? And why did such astonishing inventions disappear without a trace, leaving only mysteries behind? The answer to this question could be frightening. Perhaps these mechanisms were not rare, but on the contrary were a common part of the scientific and technological arsenal of that time. Maybe it was standard technology for navigation at sea or for astronomical calculations. However, most of these devices were made of bronze, a valuable metal that in subsequent centuries was mass melted down to produce weapons, coins, and jewelry. Today we can see only a single surviving example, as if all our ancient civilization left behind was just one smartphone. Such a rare and astonishing artifact. What would future archaeologists think of us? They would probably also call it an anomaly, easier to hide than to explain. The Antikythera mechanism shows that our past is much more complex and technologically advanced than commonly believed. It indicates that entire layers of knowledge have been lost or deliberately destroyed. The most vivid example of this is the burned Library of Alexandria, with its priceless manuscripts. But how many such libraries, large and small, have been destroyed to erase from history knowledge that did not align with the new political or religious doctrines? This bronze computer, found in the depths of the sea, is not so much a monument to the genius of the ancients as it is to our own mistakes, ignorance, and unwillingness to accept facts that may be frightening or challenge our beliefs. In southeastern Turkey, there is a hill that local residents have called the Fat Hill of Göbekli Tepe for centuries. For a long time, archaeologists considered it merely a medieval cemetery and therefore showed little interest in this area. But in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt decided to conduct excavations there. What he discovered not only changed the history of Turkey, it completely overturned our understanding of the origins of human civilization. Beneath the soil layer, it was not graves that lay hidden, but a giant temple complex. There stood dozens of massive T-shaped limestone columns, each weighing up to 20 tons. They were arranged in concentric circles, creating a grand structure. Carved into the columns were skillful images of animals: foxes, snakes, boars, and cranes. The scale and complexity of this site were astonishing, but the most incredible was yet to come. Radiocarbon analysis revealed that Göbekli Tepe is approximately 12,000 years old, To understand the significance of this, it's worth recalling that textbooks typically state that civilization began around 10,000 years ago. At that time, it was believed that the agricultural revolution marked the transition of humans to a sedentary lifestyle, involving the cultivation of grains and domestication of animals. These events, according to most scholars, served as the starting point for the emergence of cities, complex temples, religion, and culture. But Göbekli Tepe shattered this model. This megalithic complex was built 12,000 years before the advent of agriculture, 2 millennia before humans began farming. It was created by hunters and gatherers, people we tend to consider primitive, living in small groups, roaming forests and fields in search of food, residing in simple huts. This fact completely alters our understanding of human civilization's development and prompts us to wonder how many more such discoveries are hidden beneath the ground, beneath layers of time, and how much knowledge has been lost. How could people have organized themselves so powerfully and cohesively to move hundreds of tons of stone blocks several kilometers, and then precisely place them in the correct locations? What idea inspired them so deeply that they were willing to exert such colossal effort, endure hardships, and face dangers? Göbekli Tepe shows that things were not as they first appear. It claims that it was not agriculture that gave rise to religion and temple construction, but rather the desire to build sacred sites that spurred the development of civilization. Perhaps hundreds of people from different tribes gathered at this place to perform complex rituals related to their beliefs and ceremonies. To feed such a large population, new methods of food procurement and storage had to be devised. That is how agriculture emerged, the foundation upon which everything else was built. Organizing construction and managing people required a complex social structure with divisions between more and less important individuals. And it was not religion that was a result of civilization's development, but rather religion that became its driving force, a catalyst for progress. However, the most mysterious aspect of Göbekli Tepe's history remains how this ancient complex ceased to exist. It lasted about 2,000 years and then suddenly disappeared, not destroyed by war or abandoned, but deliberately buried under the earth. Its creators decided to hide their great work from future generations, burying it as if sealing it in secrecy. Why did they do this? This is one of archaeology's most complex mysteries. Perhaps their religion changed, and the need for this site vanished. Maybe they wanted to protect it from external threats or enemies. Or there is the boldest and most enigmatic theory, that behind it lay a desire to conceal and lock away knowledge associated with this sacred place. For millennia, this was the greatest achievement of human culture. Hidden underground, and only recently, in the 20th century, was it discovered. Even after its discovery, the scientific community struggled to accept this fact, as it challenged established notions of ancient history. Göbekli Tepe is not just an archaeological find. It is physical evidence that entire eras of human history may not only be forgotten, but deliberately buried by their creators. In the 20th century in 1947, a Bedouin boy searching for a lost goat wandered into a cave near Qumran, located on the shores of the Dead Sea. Inside, he found clay vessels containing ancient scrolls made of parchment and papyrus. This accidental discovery became arguably the most significant archaeological find of the 20th century related to biblical history. In subsequent years, about 900 manuscripts were found in several caves, now known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. These texts, written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, included the oldest known copies of books from the Old Testament, as well as previously unknown religious documents, statutes, and prophecies of a mysterious Jewish sect, presumably the Essenes, who lived in Qumran approximately 2,000 years ago. The value of this discovery was unimaginable. It allowed a glimpse into the world of Second Temple Judaism, the very era when Christianity was beginning to take shape. It was here that an unprecedented scale of concealment began. Initially, only a small group of scholars from various countries had access to the scrolls, mainly Catholic researchers. And for nearly 40 years, this group maintained a monopoly on these ancient texts. They published only a small portion of the scrolls, primarily those related to the Old Testament, while keeping the most mysterious and sectarian manuscripts secret. Dozens of scientists worldwide unsuccessfully requested access to photographs or originals. The response was always the same: denial. Official explanations for why the research was halted and further scans were not pursued were quite simple and lacked detail. Authorities pointed to the difficulties and painstaking nature of the process, emphasizing that technical and organizational challenges required significant effort and resources. Therefore, they claimed, further experiments were deemed too labor-intensive and economically unviable. However, within the scientific community, suspicions grew that there was more to this explanation. Many experts believed the real reason was that these unpublished scrolls contain information that could challenge prevailing views on the origins and development of Christianity. These ancient manuscripts, long kept secret, might reveal new facts or interpretations capable of altering our understanding of early religious history. For example, some of these texts describe the figure of the righteous teacher, a person very similar to Jesus, but who lived more than 100 years before him. The description of this teacher included ideas and practices that were previously considered exclusively Christian and not found in Jewish tradition. Moreover, the scrolls contain references to rituals and beliefs that had been perceived as unique to Christianity. However, it turned out that they already existed within the religious community of the Jews long before the emergence of the new religion. These discoveries caused a real scandal within the scientific community. Researchers were accused of deliberately hiding important information, attempting to protect church dogmas to prevent the emergence of inconvenient historical facts that could undermine the authority of religious institutions. Thus began a genuine struggle over the scrolls, which lasted until the early 1990s. At that time, one American library, which had access to photocopies of these manuscripts, took a risky step. It broke the ban and published them, making them accessible to the general public. This act completely shattered the monopoly on these ancient texts, and although the scrolls did not contain direct evidence capable of fundamentally changing the foundations of faith, they still demonstrated that history was much more complex than commonly believed. They revealed that many ideas underlying Christianity did not arise out of nowhere, but existed in the cultural and spiritual environment of that time. These ideas were part of a shared intellectual and spiritual melting pot, where different traditions and viewpoints intertwine. The concealment of the scrolls was a kind of attempt to preserve a simplified picture of history, to make it clearer and more unambiguous, to protect the uniqueness of certain ideas and silence others that could challenge it. This case vividly illustrates how control over ancient texts becomes a tool of power, allowing one to manipulate the perception of the past. It also shows how reluctance to change the established worldview leads to knowledge being hidden for decades or even centuries. This story takes us back to Egypt, to the secrets of tombs and the mystery of Tutankhamun, and directly echoes the idea of concealing significant archaeological discoveries. It proves that the practice of hiding important information has not disappeared into the past. It remains relevant today. In our time, in the era of satellite technology and ground-penetrating radar, hiding information is becoming increasingly difficult, but there are still attempts to conceal crucial facts. For example, consider the story related to the hypothesis of a hidden tomb of Nefertiti behind the walls of Tutankhamun's burial chamber. In 2015, researcher Nicholas Rips proposed the idea that behind the walls of the famous tomb, there might be another, previously unknown one. This hypothesis was confirmed by radar scanning data, which revealed the presence of voids and even organic materials inside the wall, potentially indicating the presence of mummies or wooden objects. Initially, the Egyptian authorities supported the idea, but suddenly and unexpectedly changed their stance. Why were all the detailed technical data of this mysterious investigation not fully published? There was a feeling that the final result was not accidental, but was obtained on the orders of certain forces. Why was this done? Perhaps the authorities feared that publishing all the details would provoke uncontrollable interest and excitement that could spiral out of control. Or maybe they conducted their own covert investigation, about which they do not want to speak publicly, because they found something very important, or conversely, something so problematic that it's better to freeze the situation for now and avoid attracting attention. Perhaps they decided to keep this discovery under wraps until a more suitable moment, to present it in the future when the political or economic climate becomes more favorable. This story vividly demonstrates how modern science faces opacity and potential concealment of information. We have technologies capable of seeing through walls, detecting the invisible, and penetrating deeply hidden objects. But if someone does not want us to do this, our capabilities are powerless. This brings us to the greatest secret we began with, the very mystery connected to the robot that looked behind a door that had not been opened for the last 4,500 years. When we start to understand that hiding inconvenient artifacts and knowledge is not a fiction, but a real part of history, it becomes clear that we are dealing with a long-standing practice of concealing information. Now let's return to the narrow shaft of the Great Pyramid, to the final project, tentatively called Scarab 4. This project was the culmination of all previous attempts to penetrate inside. A robot specially designed for this purpose was smaller in size, more maneuverable, and equipped with a unique composite drill capable of boring through stone almost without vibration. Its task was to overcome the so-called Gantenbrink door in the southern shaft leading to the Queen's chamber. It had to pass through a small void behind it and drill through the last, second obstacle. And it succeeded. Slowly, centimeter by centimeter, it made its way through the limestone slab. The connection with the surface team remained stable. Sensors transmitted parameters, temperature, pressure, air composition behind the slab. And then came the moment of breakthrough. The drill penetrated the void. The robot advanced further and activated a wide-angle, high-resolution camera. And then what would later be called a technical failure occurred. Only a few seconds of video were transmitted to the screens before the image froze, covered with static noise, and the connection was lost. The official version, as we remember, boiled down to the idea that inside there was a tiny empty room and the malfunction was caused by dust. But that single frame that leaked online tells a completely different story. It was obtained through overlaying and digital processing of the last seconds of the video. And in this frame, there is nothing resembling an empty room. Instead, we see part of a much larger space than previously assumed. Its walls are not made of rough limestone blocks, as in the entire pyramid, but are smooth, polished to a mirror shine, and crafted from dark, almost black stone, something similar to basalt, but without a single crack or seam. The most astonishing thing is what is located in the center of this space and on its walls. At the center, as the lens allows us to see, there is neither a sarcophagus nor a statue. Instead, there is a strange crystalline object of unusual shape, made from the same black material. It does not rest on the floor, but appears to hover on thin supports. Behind it, there are no hieroglyphs or inscriptions on the wall. Instead, there is something that stunned and bewildered engineers and physicists. The entire wall before us is covered with intricate engravings and patterns, which are not just drawings or inscriptions. They are complex, multi-layered ornaments that evoke associations with electrical schematics or wave diagrams. These patterns consist of long, interwoven lines resembling traces on printed circuit boards and include geometric figures interconnected in a complex network. Some of the images resemble resonators or waveguides, while the recurring symbols on the surface have no parallels in Egyptian tradition. Physicists studying these symbols compared them to graphical representations of harmonics and frequencies, as if they are related to vibrations and oscillations hidden within the structure. This frame shows not a typical tomb or monument of the ancients, but an entire machinery hall. In its center is some mechanism, the heart of which might be the entire pyramid. Imagine the reaction of those who discovered such an image. This is not just a valuable archaeological treasure or the tomb of an unknown pharaoh. It is direct evidence that the civilization of ancient Egypt possessed knowledge and technologies we could not even dream of. Therefore, the Great Pyramid is not only a burial site, but perhaps a giant energy generator or a powerful resonator. It may have used sound frequencies to influence matter, or it could have been part of a long-lost global system related to controlling energy or information. Acknowledging this would mean not just revising textbooks, it would imply that our entire history is a lie. Such a fact could trigger an uncontrollable crisis in science, religion, and our entire worldview. It would challenge our place in the history of the planet, forcing us to rethink the entire picture of the past. In such a situation, any ruler or leader faced with this discovery would most likely try to conceal it. They would claim that the equipment malfunctioned or dismiss the footage as a forgery. Access to the pyramid would be restricted to prevent further research and to keep the secret until the situation calms down. What was recorded by the robot is obviously not being hidden, not because they fear looters or tourists, but because they fear the truth itself. And the truth is that over 4,500 years ago, on the Giza Plateau, there stood not just an architectural marvel, but a functioning device of incredible complexity and purpose. Today, thanks to our technologies, we have only slightly opened the door behind which this secret is hidden. We peeked through the keyhole, and although the one holding the key has decided to lock it again, we still know the door exists. And this knowledge changes everything. This discovery is a step toward understanding that ancient knowledge and technologies could have been far more advanced than we previously believed. And right now, as we are just beginning to uncover these secrets, we have the opportunity to grasp the true meaning of this mysterious structure. A huge thank you to everyone who watched this story until the end. Your support and attention are very important to us. Remember the importance of paying attention to the details so as not to miss anything truly significant. Let your curiosity and desire to learn guide you forward. And may the knowledge we share help you realize that everything around us is much more complex and fascinating than it seems at first glance.